Okay, this is another tutorial. We're gonna do Maya in relation to Rhino, how to export surfaces, nerve surfaces in this case, to Rhino, and then use a very easy, straightforward script from Grasshopper to generate a complex surface shape. Okay, the first thing is we need to make sure that this I chosen the Barcelona pavilion by friend Gary. Uh, and I'm gonna use one of its faces, one of its planes here to take it into Rhino. So the first thing is to actually, in order to take it to Rhino, I need to have a polygon mesh here. So I'm gonna do a modify, and I'm gonna convert it from nerves to polygons. This is a very easy way to take it to polygons. And I didn't say, but you have all these options that you can use for convert nerves to polygons, and I mean you can do triangles, you can do by control points, etc. The one I like to use, at least to take into Rhino, is quads and count, and a good number of counts. You can test different numbers until you have the quads, which is the four angle rectangles here, um, associated with the surface that you want. So that will be fine, and so it gets this geometry that now we can easily, and as I said in other tutorials, you need to make sure in Windows setting preference plugin manager that you have click the OBJ export MLL option here, click and click. So before exporting, make sure that you have on that. You select the surface here, and you're gonna say file export selected, and I'm going to take it to the desktop and then call it 1 and make sure that you in OBJ export here and say export. Perfect. Now I'm going to pause it for a second in order to close Maya and open Rhino, because I cannot handle both in this computer. Okay, it's Rhino. So what I'm going to do is pretty much file open, and I'm going to go to my where I have my OBJ, which is in desktop, so remember. And if you don't see it, it's just because it's searching for a Rhino model here, so you have to take a to all type of model, and you will see it then. It's an OBJ there, and say open, and there is our shape. One thing that we need to know, I think I mentioned before, is that y-axis, it's here placed in the green line as an horizontal axis, versus in Maya the y-axis, the vertical, what corresponds to the z. So this is normal, so don't freak out. The only thing you need to do is select your object here and say rotate 3D, and from the 0, 0 coordinate always make a rotation in 3D in regarding to this axis, which is the x-axis, no? And then 1 and 2. Okay, you can also go take us to the right view, and from the 0, 0 rotate 90 degrees here, so that's fine. Okay, we have it. Now another thing we need to know from Maya is that we're gonna get a mesh. This is a mesh. We need a nerves at least to take it into Grasshopper as I want it. So the first thing we need to do is select the mesh, and I'm gonna actually say mesh to nerves. So I type that, select mesh to nerves, and press enter. And I'm gonna delete because it's selected without selection, without deselecting anything. Just delete the old existing mesh. Okay, this is our nerve surface, and it's quite nice. We could even render it or whatever here or work with it. But what we want to do is basically take it to Grasshopper. So we type up here Grasshopper and we press enter. And if you go to computers at the university, you should have a Grasshopper there. So there's no excuse, you have to do this. Next step is go open document, and I know you have in the S drive, not here. I'm gonna close it so you don't look at this while I'm talking about it. You should go to the S drive, and I think under course 4709 you should check the exercises, and I think it's the exercise 08, and you have to go to folder Rhino, and inside of Rhino you have to go to Grasshopper. There's two files there, and that's the one you have to open here is actually called let me go to it first. you will have these two files in it. And I've used multi-volume to generate the other script in the earlier tutorial, but we're going to use multi-surfaces to work with this guy, which is a surface with open. It's an open surface basically versus a closed volume. No, so we're going to press that and say open. And this is pretty much a very simple script on Grasshopper. And there's two inputs here in the left here. One is for the geometry, and there's another one that we're going to generate a point, which is going to understand a relationship of distance between point and each quad to generate afterwards a respondent geometry in each of those nerve surfaces. So as you can see, orange means there's no data coming in, so we need to actually right click on each of these. So what we're going to do is right click on geometry and say set one geometry, and automatically Grasshopper disappears, and we just click on the geometry and it turns from what it was orange before to gray. It's fine, and that's what we want. And now the next one, this one is waiting or expecting a point. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a point. I'm going to press a point. I'm going to put it like here, for example, and I generate that point. That now if I go back to Grasshopper by pressing on the gray area, I'm going to right click here and say set one geometry and select the point. Automatically, I'm going to pause it. Oh, actually it took less than I thought. Okay, as you can see, this has happened. Basically created what we wanted already. Now I created, I guess, in a different side, but it's fine. I mean, we don't need to do it in different side, and it's just calculating all these kind of spikes coming out, which could be like architectural feature, and it's just the distance between the point and each of the quads are going to be going to be multiple of the distance that each of spike is coming out. So something that you may change here is this by double clicking here and pressing like 10 and the green mark here, and it should change this quite differently. You see how the distance, these are shorter than this one, but let's make it radically different so we see what's going on. There we go. These are very long compared to this one, so I'm going to put it in 20 as it was before. I like it. You can also increase that 20 by double clicking on this area here and changing this number. You can set 40 and press OK, and then double click here and say 35, and it should change quite everything. There we go. So I'm going to leave it there. You should play if you want with that slider as you wish. Another thing you can do, like for example in this case, I think we could select the face. If the spikes, we want them in the opposite side, we could say flip in Rhino, so it's going to flip all the faces, and automatically the spikes will come out outwards compared to what it was before. And there you go. It's nice geometry that we can work with. So the next step we have to do is as simple as right clicking on these guys and say bake, which is basically, this is red geometry. It's not something that we can touch or not even select or just play with it in any sense. It's just abstract geometry that is generated by Grasshopper, so we have to bake it, what it's called, to be able to work with it. So you bake it and you say okay here in the layer you want it, and I'm going to do it next to this one, bake, and to this one, bake. Okay, good. Now we can close Grasshopper now, and there we go. We have our geometry there. What I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to just delete or actually hide poly surface that we had before in order to take just this new generated geometry by Grasshopper. I'm going to select it all and I'm going to export it. In order to export it, what we need to make sure first is that if we type options and we go to plugins, we need to make sure that plugins, in the plugins we have OBJ export, where is it? Here is OBJ export loaded. In my case it's a good example because it says no, so you have to right click and say load plugin. It will say yes now and say okay. Now you can select whatever you want to export to Maya again and say file export selected. And as simple as saving here, and OBJ should show up here. Where is this? Anybody sees it? I wonder if I haven't loaded correctly. Oh, let me check it out, and before we do anything, that the options are there. Actually, BJ says yes. Okay, and now we say select, and we say file export selected, and it should be here. If it's not here, oh, here's wavefront. It was probably here. I was just either here's the one we had before. So I'm going to press number 2 and say save, and we need to press Y up in order to take it to Maya, and polygon mesh and curves. Very simple. I'm going to say OK, and these are triangles, so the fewer the polygons the better. So we take this and scroll it down. OK. Okay, I'm going to pause it there. In the next one, we're just going to do a very simple geometry render of this. Okay, done.